it's time to talk business. With Nigeria's gross domestic products between 3 and 4%, the country's non-oil revenue mobilization remains one of the lowest in the world, reflecting weaknesses in revenue administration systems and systemic non-compliance. The Director General, West African Institute for Financial and Economic Management, Dr. Baba Musa, disclosed this over the weekend. Mr. Musa noted that persistent budgetary shortfalls were wrong for the economy and advised government against spending money on unproductive programs which do not increase economic productivity and resulting in a rise in national debt. According to the DG of the Institute, a fiscal deficit which has seen the situation with Nigeria over the years crowd out private sector borrowing, decrease net exports, manipulate capital structures and interest rates, and lead to either higher taxes, higher inflation, or both. However, the Director General of the institution, which is owned by the central banks in Anglophone West African countries, including the Central Bank of Nigeria, stressed that one of the major hindrances to improved internal revenue was the political will to enforce taxes. Well, the federal government says it will begin steps towards creating a separate and foreign exchange window for exporting manufacturers. The Minister of Trade and Investment, Mr. Niyi Adebayo, dropped the hint during the annual General Conference of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria Export Promotion. The minister was reacting to a plea by the manufacturers asking the federal government to support the sector by allowing operators access foreign forex through a special window to be created by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Meanwhile, manufacturers contended that other countries such as South Africa were already embracing such moves as a means of encouraging manufacturing activities. In recent years, the acute shortage of foreign exchange in Nigeria has constituted a major operational nightmare facing manufacturers in the country. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, is calling for more savings from crude oil revenue to improve Nigeria's budget deficit and funding. IMF Divisional Chief from the Fiscal Affairs Department, Mr. Paulo Medas, made the request during the Fiscal Monitor briefing at the ongoing IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. He notes that while Nigeria has benefited from higher oil revenues, the fund has not seen any improvement in deficits as suspected because of the large energy subsidies, oil production, and pressures on the budget. On his part, Director of Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF, Mr. Victor Gaspar, he notes that 19 of the 35 low-income countries in West Africa are in debt distress as more than 120 million people on the continent do not have enough food to eat. Bayelsa State has been ranked as the most dependent state on federal allocations for budgetary implementation. This was made known by Budget in Abuja, the nation's capital, at an official launch of its state-to-state report. The report also reveals that Rivers State ranks the highest in fiscal performance in terms of having more comparative public revenue left to implement capital expenditure. Helen Osemede Akins report.
Nigeria is witnessing one of the most challenging periods in its history as a nation. Widespread insecurity, protracted insurgency, deepening poverty, massive unemployment, dwindling revenue, skyrocketing inflation, and a sliding currency. This has caused untold hardship and unstable revenue for state governments to operate. The state-to-state report of budget has shown that Bayelsa, Adamawa, Gombe, Benue and Zamfara states are very dependent on federal allocations for budgetary implementation, with Bayelsa proportion of dependency at 90.30%. It is estimated that the Bayelsa's total revenue of 217,638,452,235 naira 27 kobo is dependent solely on its gross federation account allocation of 196,527,603,326 naira. The country director Budget Nigerian Gabriel Kiwu says this year's edition, the number of data sets was increased compared to last year.
We had Oyo, Nasarawa, Akwa Ibom, Ogun, Lagos. So Lagos is the least dependent on federal transfers for the implementation of their budgets. And most states need to win themselves off this over-dependence or over-reliance on FARC.
Some intervention areas where reforms could either be consolidated or activated by states were highlighted.
Cost of governance. This area needs drastic reforms in reducing the cost of governance. It involves streamlining or merging governance structures, reducing the number of political aides, slashing humongous salaries, and reducing extra budgetary expenses.
Budget state-to-state report continues advocacy for the optimization of Nigerians' revenue base towards a more inclusive society through a needed focus on states. Helen Osamide-Akins, TVC News, Abuja.
Well, let's turn to global markets now as Asian shares market slipped today following another beating for Wall Street as investors braced for a further drastic tightening in global financial conditions with all the risks recession brings. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey warned over the weekend that interest rates might now have to rise by more than thought just a couple of months ago. FTSE futures fell at 0.5% and Euro Stock 50 futures at 0.6%. MSCI's Products Index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan eased at 1.2% and back towards last week 2.5-year low. Japan's Nikkei shared at 1.4%, South Korea 0.1%, and China's blue chips are dipped to 0.4% ahead of GDP data due on tomorrow. S&P 500 futures edged up by 0.4% after Friday's sharp retreat, while Nasdaq futures added at 0.3%. Let's wrap things off now as oil prices of the international market rose today after China rolled over liquidity measures to help its pandemic-hit economy, igniting hopes for a better fuel demand outlook from the world's top crude importer. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude recorded an upward price review of 1.14% to sell at $86.59 per barrel. The Brent crude futures also experienced an uptick of 1.17%, selling for $92.70 per barrel. And Bonnie Light sells at $93.84 per barrel, with a price decline of 1.28%. While the OPEC basket or crude oil dealers are offering $93.60 per barrel, with a downward price review of 3.87%.